How did it come to this? I only wanted one night of freedom, but instead, I came home to divorce papers served at my own front door. Can a single ultimatum really destroy everything? Or was he always planning to turn my own game against me? The kitchen smelled like burnt coffee and disappointment. I stood at the granite counter, gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles had gone white, staring at Grant's back as he loaded the dishwasher with mechanical precision. Every clink of the plates felt like a judgment. "I'm staying at my mom's tonight," I announced, my voice sharper than I'd intended. "Girls' night. We already planned everything." Grant's shoulders tensed, but he didn't turn around. "It's Wednesday, Mireille. Sadie has her school presentation tomorrow morning. You promised you'd help her practice." "She'll be fine. You can handle one presentation." I scrolled through my phone, pretending to check messages while my heart hammered against my ribs. "I need this, Grant. I need some time to breathe." "Breathe from what?" He finally faced me, his dark eyes searching mine with that infuriating calm he always maintained. "What's suffocating you here?" The question hit too close to home. Everything felt suffocating lately. This house with its perfect suburban facade, Grant's predictable routines, even 6-year-old Sadie's constant need for attention. But I couldn't say that without sounding like a monster. "You wouldn't understand," I muttered, turning away. "You're perfectly content with this monotony. Some of us need more." "More what? What exactly are you looking for at your mother's apartment that you can't find here?" His tone remained level, but I caught the edge underneath. Good. At least he was feeling something. Connection, understanding, someone who actually listens when I talk instead of just waiting for their turn to lecture me about responsibilities. Grant closed the dishwasher with deliberate care. "When have I ever lectured you?" "You're doing it right now." I slammed my phone on the counter. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. I can't even express a simple need without you questioning every detail like I'm on trial." I asked one question about timing. "No, you question my judgment, again." I felt the familiar surge of righteous anger that always came when Grant's reasonableness made me feel unreasonable. "You act like I'm some irresponsible teenager who can't be trusted to make her own decisions." "That's not—" "It is exactly that." I grabbed my purse from the counter, checking to make sure my overnight bag was still packed by the door. "I'm 32 years old, Grant. I don't need permission to spend one night with my mother." "I never said you needed permission." "Then what's the problem?" Grant ran his hand through his hair, a gesture I'd once found endearing but now just irritated me. "There's no problem. Go, have a good time." But his tone said otherwise, that carefully controlled voice that meant he was biting back whatever he really wanted to say. The same tone he'd been using more and more lately, whenever I tried to reclaim some piece of my life. "Don't do that," I snapped. "Do what?" "That passive-aggressive thing where you say it's fine but make it clear you think I'm being selfish." "Mireille, I literally just told you to go have a good time." "It's not what you said, it's how you said it." I could hear my voice rising, but I couldn't stop myself. 6 months of feeling trapped in this house, in this routine, in this marriage that felt more like a prison sentence every day, all came pouring out. "You know what? I'm done asking for permission. I'm done justifying every single thing I want to do. Either you trust me to make my own decisions, or you don't." "Of course I trust you." "No, you don't. You hover and question and make me feel guilty for wanting anything that doesn't revolve around this house, or Sadie, or your schedule." The words tumbled out faster now, each one feeling like a small rebellion. "I'm suffocating here, Grant. I'm disappearing into this perfect little suburban life you've built, and you don't even see it." Grant's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "What do you want me to see?" "That I'm dying inside." The admission burst out of me before I could stop it. That I wake up every morning feeling like I'm sleepwalking through someone else's life. That I need something more than grocery shopping and PTA meetings and pretending everything is wonderful. "So spending the night at your mother's is going to fix that?" "It's a start." I hefted my bag onto my shoulder. It's one night where I can remember who I used to be before I became just Grant's wife and Sadie's mother. You've always been more than that. Have I? When was the last time you asked me about my dreams, my goals, what I want out of life? I waited, but he didn't answer. Exactly. Because somewhere along the way, I stopped being a person and became a role. Grant leaned against the counter, studying me with an expression I couldn't read. And your mother's going to help you figure out who you really are. At least she listens without judging. I don't judge you. You're judging me right now. I can see it in your face. That look that says I'm being dramatic and unreasonable and selfish for wanting one night away from all this responsibility. That's not what I'm thinking. Then what are you thinking? Grant was quiet for a long moment, and I could practically see him choosing his words carefully. Finally, he said, I'm thinking that if one night away is what you need, then you should go. But something in his tone made my stomach clench. It wasn't the reluctant permission I'd been fighting for. It was something else entirely. Something that sounded almost like resignation. Fine, I said, suddenly unsure why his agreement felt like a loss instead of a victory. I'll be back tomorrow evening. Drive safely. I stood there for a moment, waiting for him to say something else, to fight a little harder for me to stay. But Grant just turned back to wiping down the already clean counters, effectively dismissing me. The silence stretched between us, filled with all the things we weren't saying. I wanted him to argue more, to show some passion, some indication that my leaving mattered to him. Instead, he was giving me exactly what I'd asked for, and it felt hollow. Tell Sadie I love her, I said finally. I will. I lingered in the doorway, bag in hand, waiting for something I couldn't name. Grant kept cleaning, his movements efficient and controlled, not looking at me. I'll text you when I get there, I offered. Okay. The word hung in the air between us, polite and distant. I wanted to say something else, to bridge the sudden gap that had opened up, but I didn't know how. And part of me, the part that had been feeling trapped and restless for months, didn't want to bridge it at all. Goodbye, Grant. Bye. I walked out of the kitchen, grabbed my keys from the hall table, and headed for the door. As I reached for the handle, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Mummy? Sadie's voice was small and sleepy. Where are you going? I turned to see her standing halfway down the staircase in her princess pajamas, clutching her stuffed elephant. Her dark hair was messy from sleep, and her eyes held that confused look children get when they sense adult tension without understanding it. I'm going to spend the night with Grandma Lila, I said, forcing brightness into my voice. Just for tonight, Daddy will be here with you. But what about my presentation practice? The guilt hit me like a physical blow. Daddy can help you practice. He's really good at that stuff. But you promised. I know, sweetheart, but sometimes grown-ups have to change plans. You understand, right? Sadie's lower lip trembled slightly, but she nodded. Will you be back tomorrow? Of course. I'll be back before dinner, I promise. Grant appeared at the top of the stairs, his expression unreadable. Come on, Sadie. Let's get you back to bed. We can practice your presentation first thing in the morning. Okay, Daddy. Sadie looked back at me one more time. I love you, Mummy. I love you too, baby. I waited until Grant had guided her back upstairs before finally leaving. As I walked to my car, I pulled out my phone and sent a quick text to my mother. On my way over. Thanks for covering for me. Her response came immediately. Of course, honey. You deserve a break. Grant should understand that. But as I drove through the quiet suburban streets toward downtown, I wasn't thinking about my mother's apartment. I was thinking about the Lantern, the little pub where Joel worked, where he'd told me yesterday that he'd be closing alone tonight. My phone buzzed with another text from my mother. I'll leave the spare key under the mat in case you get here after I'm asleep. Sweet dreams, darling. I smiled and typed back, Thanks, Mum. Love you. The lie came so easily, it barely registered as one anymore. The Lantern sat on a quiet corner downtown, its warm yellow light spilling onto the sidewalk like a beacon. I parked across the street and checked my reflection in the rearview mirror, touching up my lipstick and running my fingers through my hair. My heart was racing with the kind of excitement I hadn't felt in years. Joel was wiping down tables when I walked in, the last customer having left 10 minutes earlier. He looked up and smiled, that easy, crooked grin that had first caught my attention 3 months ago when I'd started stopping by after work. Well, look what the cat dragged in. He tossed the rag over his shoulder and moved behind the bar. Thought you had family obligations tonight. Plans changed. I slid onto my usual bar stool, the one with the perfect view of him moving around behind the bar. Turned out I needed some adult conversation more than I thought. Adult conversation, huh? Joel's eyes sparkled with mischief as he poured my usual whiskey sour, extra cherry. And here I thought you just came for my devastating good looks and sparkling personality. Those are just bonus features. He laughed, and the sound sent warmth spreading through my chest. This was what I'd been missing. Easy banter, flirtation, the feeling of being seen as something other than a wife and mother. With Joelle, I wasn't Mireille who forgot to buy milk and argued with her husband about household responsibilities. I was just Mireille, interesting and attractive and worth pursuing. So, what kind of adult conversation did you have in mind? Joel leaned against the bar, close enough that I could smell his cologne mixed with the faint scent of beer and lime. The kind where someone actually listens when I talk, instead of mentally calculating whether I've balanced the checkbook or scheduled Sadie's dentist appointment. Rough night at home? I took a long sip of my drink, savoring the burn. Rough month, rough year if I'm being honest. Want to talk about it? And I did. For the next hour, as Joel finished closing duties and poured himself a beer, I talked about everything. The suffocating routine of suburban life, Grant's emotional distance, the way I felt like I was disappearing into a role I'd never really chosen. Joel listened, really listened, asking questions and making observations that showed he was actually paying attention. "Sounds like you married your father," he said finally, which made me laugh despite myself. God, that's depressing, but not entirely wrong. I finished my second drink and felt the pleasant buzz settling into my bones. Grant's a good man, responsible, reliable, steady, all the things I thought I wanted when I was 25 and tired of dating guys who couldn't hold down jobs. But steady can start to feel like stagnant. Reliable can start to feel like boring. I traced patterns in the condensation on my glass. When was the last time he surprised me? When was the last time he looked at me like I was something precious instead of just expected? Joel moved around the bar to sit beside me, close enough that our knees touched. His loss. The simple words, combined with the way he was looking at me, like I was definitely something precious, made my breath catch. Joel, what? I shouldn't be here. Why not? You're a grown woman. You can have a drink wherever you want. It's not about the drink, he smiled, reaching over to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear. I know. My phone buzzed against the bar. Grant's name appeared on the screen. Did you make it to your mom's okay? The text was like a bucket of cold water, reminding me of the lie I was living in real time. I quickly typed back, just got here, going to bed soon, love you. Everything okay? Joel asked, noticing my expression. Just Grant checking in. I put the phone face down on the bar, being responsible and caring like always. You don't sound happy about that. I should be, shouldn't I? I should be grateful that I have a husband who worries about me getting somewhere safely. I laughed bitterly. Instead, it just feels like another leash. Joel's hand covered mine on the bar. Mireille, you know you don't have to stay in something that makes you unhappy. Don't I? We have a daughter, a house, a whole life built together. Built by who? For who? His thumb traced circles on the back of my hand. From what you've told me, it sounds like you've spent the last 7 years building Grant's vision of the perfect life. What about your vision? I don't even remember what that looked like anymore. Maybe it's time to figure it out. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, his hand warm over mine, the bar quiet except for the soft jazz playing from the speakers. I felt more relaxed than I had in months, more like myself than I'd been in years. I should go, I said finally, but made no move to leave. Should you? My mother's expecting me. Is she? The question hung in the air between us, loaded with possibility and danger in equal measure. I thought about my mother's text, about the spare key under the mat, about how easy it would be to show up in the morning with coffee and croissants and stories about our girls' night. Joel, I'm not pushing, he said quietly. I'm just saying that sometimes we all need a break from being who everyone expects us to be. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my mother. Sleep tight, sweetheart. So proud of you for taking some time for yourself. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here was my mother, praising me for self-care while I sat in a bar at midnight, holding hands with a man who wasn't my husband, contemplating choices that would have horrified her if she knew the truth. But that was the thing about truth. It was subjective. My truth was that I felt more alive in this moment than I had in years. My truth was that Joel saw me as a woman worth desiring, not just a role to be filled. My truth was that I deserved to feel wanted and appreciated and alive. One more drink, I said, and Joel smiled. Coming right up. By the time we left the Lantern, it was nearly 2 a.m. Joel's apartment was a short walk away, a converted loft above a vintage clothing store that perfectly matched his laid-back aesthetic. As he unlocked the door, I felt a moment of clarity about what I was doing, what line I was about to cross. Second thoughts? He asked, noticing my hesitation. Third and fourth thoughts. Want me to call you a cab? I looked at him standing in the doorway, backlit by the warm light from his apartment, and felt that familiar surge of rebellion against the life that felt too small for me. No, I said, stepping inside. I don't. The next few hours passed in a blur of whispered conversations, gentle touches, and the intoxicating feeling of being truly wanted. Joel was everything Grant wasn't. Spontaneous, passionate, focused entirely on my pleasure and satisfaction. In his arms, I remembered who I used to be before I became defined by my relationships to other people. When I woke up at dawn, Joel was still sleeping beside me, his arm draped across my waist. For a moment, I let myself imagine what it would be like to wake up like this every morning, free from schedules and responsibilities and the weight of other people's expectations. Then, reality crashed back in. I had to get to my mother's apartment before she woke up, had to create the evidence of a night that had never happened, had to slip back into my role as Grant's wife and Sadie's mother, as if nothing had changed. But something had changed. I had changed. And as I quietly gathered my clothes and prepared to leave, I knew there was no going back to the woman who had walked into the Lantern last night. I stopped at a convenience store on the way to my mother's, buying coffee and pastries and taking a selfie in her bathroom mirror to send to the family group chat. Girls' night was exactly what I needed, I typed. Thanks for understanding, Grant. His response came quickly. Glad you had a good time. See you tonight. Simple, supportive, completely trusting. The guilt should have eaten me alive, but instead, I felt a strange sense of power. For once, I had done something entirely for myself, and the world hadn't ended. In fact, it felt like it was just beginning. I spent the morning at my mother's apartment, carefully constructing the evidence of a night that had never happened there. We had coffee on her balcony, while I told her edited versions of my marital frustrations, enough truth to make the lies feel authentic, but nothing that would make her actually worry. You just need to be firmer with Grant, she said, refilling my cup. Men need clear boundaries, or they'll walk all over you. It's not that simple, Mum. It's exactly that simple. You're too accommodating, Mireille. You let him make all the decisions, and then resent him for it. She leaned back in her wicker chair, sunglasses perched on her nose. Take control of your own life. If only she knew how much control I'd taken last night. The thought made me smile. which she interpreted as agreement. That's my girl. Now what are you going to do differently? I'm going to stop asking permission for everything, I said, and meant it. By the time I drove home that evening, I felt armored in my secret, protected by the knowledge that I had successfully carved out a space that was entirely mine. Grant was in the kitchen making dinner when I walked in, and Sadie ran to hug me like I'd been gone for weeks instead of one night. "Mommy, I practiced my presentation with Daddy, and he said I did great." "That's wonderful, sweetheart." I hugged her tight, breathing in her familiar scent of strawberry shampoo and childhood innocence. "I can't wait to hear it." "How was your night?" Grant asked without turning around from the stove. His tone was carefully neutral, but I caught something underneath it, a tension that hadn't been there before. "Exactly what I needed," I said, echoing my text from that morning. "Mum and I talked for hours. It felt good to just decompress." "Good, I'm glad." But he still didn't look at me, and something about his posture, the rigid set of his shoulders, the mechanical way he stirred the sauce, made my stomach clench with unease. "Everything okay here?" I asked. "Fine. Sadie's presentation went well this morning. Mrs. Henderson said she was very prepared." The subtle emphasis on prepared felt like a criticism, but when I looked at his face, his expression was perfectly pleasant. "I'm sorry I missed it. I know I promised to help her practice." "It worked out fine." "Grant, are you upset with me?" He finally turned around, and his smile was so normal, so perfectly Grant-like, that I wondered if I'd imagined the tension. "Of course not. You needed a break. I understand that." But something felt off. The conversation was too polite, too careful. Grant was treating me like a houseguest instead of his wife. Did something happen while I was gone? Nothing happened. We had a quiet evening, got Sadie to bed on time, had a nice morning together. Everything was perfectly normal. The word normal hung in the air between us, loaded with meaning I couldn't quite grasp. Over dinner, Grant was attentive and engaged, asking Sadie about her day and discussing weekend plans with the kind of easy domesticity that usually made me feel trapped. Tonight, though, it felt different. Performative, almost, like he was playing the role of the perfect husband and father, a little too deliberately. "I was thinking we could take Sadie to the zoo this weekend," he said, passing me the salad. "If you're not too tired from your night out." "I'm not tired. A night with Mum was hardly exhausting." "Of course not. Just thought you might want to ease back into family time." There it was again, that subtle edge wrapped in reasonable words. I studied his face, but his expression remained pleasant and open. "Grant, if you have something to say, just say it." "I don't have anything to say. I'm glad you got what you needed." Sadie looked back and forth between us, her 6-year-old radar picking up the adult tension, even if she couldn't identify it. "Are you and Daddy fighting?" she asked me. "Of course not, sweetheart," I said quickly. "Daddy and I are just talking." "It sounds like when you and Daddy whisper fight." Grant and I exchanged a look over her head. She was right. We did have a particular tone we used when we argued in front of her. All surface politeness covering deeper frustrations. "No whisper fighting tonight," Grant said, reaching over to ruffle her hair. "Just regular conversation." But after Sadie went to bed, the careful politeness continued. Grant cleaned up the kitchen while I sorted through mail, both of us moving around each other with the kind of choreographed distance that comes from years of practice at avoiding conflict. "I'm going to take a shower," I announced, hoping the normalcy of routine would break whatever spell we seemed to be under. "Okay, I'll be in the living room." I stood under the hot water for a long time, trying to wash away the lingering scent of Joel's cologne and the guilt that was finally starting to creep in around the edges of my defiance. When I came out, Grant was sitting on our bed, my phone in his hands. "What are you doing?" The question came out sharper than I'd intended. "Your phone kept buzzing. I thought it might be important." He held it out to me, his expression unreadable. "Joel from the Lantern wants to know if you made it home safely." My blood turned to ice water. What? Joel, from the lantern. He's concerned about whether you made it home safely from your mother's house. Grant's voice was still perfectly calm, but his eyes were cold. Interesting that a bartender downtown would be worried about your commute from the suburbs. I took the phone with hands that weren't quite steady. Sure enough, there was a text from Joel. Hope you made it home okay. Thanks for last night. I can explain, I said automatically. Can you? Grant stood up, and for the first time since I'd known him, he looked genuinely intimidating. Not angry, that would have been easier to handle. He looked disappointed in a way that cut deeper than rage ever could have. It's not what you think. What do I think, Mireille? I stopped by the lantern for a drink before going to Mum's. Joel was working. We talked. That's all. That's all? Yes. Grant nodded slowly, like he was processing this information. So you went to a bar alone, had drinks with another man, and then went to your mother's for the night. It wasn't like that. What was it like? I opened my mouth to explain, but the words wouldn't come. How could I explain the suffocating feeling that had driven me there? The need to feel like something other than a wife and mother for a few hours? The way Joel made me feel alive in a way I'd almost forgotten was possible. I needed to talk to someone, I said finally. Someone who wasn't me. Yes. About our marriage. About everything. Grant sat back down on the bed, suddenly looking very tired. How long has this been going on? There's nothing going on. Mireille, please don't lie to me anymore. I can handle the truth, but I can't handle being lied to. The word anymore hit me like a slap. He knew. Somehow he knew everything. How long have you known? I asked quietly. I suspected something was off a few weeks ago. You've been different, distant, secretive. He rubbed his face with both hands. I kept telling myself I was being paranoid, that you were just going through a rough patch. But last night what? Last night I realized that my wife would rather lie to me and sneak around than just tell me she's unhappy. The pain in his voice was worse than anger would have been. I sat down beside him, careful to leave space between us. Grant, I am unhappy, but not because of you, because of me, because I don't know who I am anymore outside of being your wife and Sadie's mother. So you decided to find out by having an affair? The word hung in the air between us, ugly and undeniable. It's not an affair. It's just... What? What is it exactly? I struggled to find words that would make him understand. It's feeling like myself again. It's remembering that I'm a person with thoughts and feelings and desires that don't revolve around grocery lists and school schedules. And you can't feel like a person here? With me? Can you honestly say you've looked at me, really looked at me, as anything other than Sadie's mother in the last year? Grant was quiet for a long moment. Is that what this is about? You feeling unappreciated? It's about feeling invisible. So instead of talking to me about it, you decided to talk to Joel. I tried talking to you. Every time I brought up feeling restless or trapped, you'd suggest I take up a hobby or join a book club, like I was some bored housewife who just needed a new activity to fill her time. What did you want me to suggest? I wanted you to ask me what I needed. I wanted you to fight for me, for us. I wanted you to care enough to dig deeper than surface solutions. Grant stood up and walked to the window, staring out at our perfectly manicured yard. So, this is my fault. It's not about fault. Isn't it? You just spent 10 minutes explaining how my failure as a husband drove you into another man's arms. That's not what I said. It's exactly what you said. He turned back to face me, and I was shocked to see tears in his eyes. The thing is, Mireille, you might be right. Maybe I did stop seeing you as anything other than Sadie's mother. Maybe I did get comfortable and stop trying. But instead of giving me a chance to fix it, you decided to blow up our marriage. I haven't blown up anything. Haven't you? We stared at each other across our bedroom, 7 years of marriage, and all its accumulated disappointments and unspoken resentments hanging between us like a wall. What happens now? I asked finally. Grant wiped his eyes and straightened his shoulders, and I watched him transform back into the controlled, reasonable man I'd married. "Now we figure out if there's anything left worth saving," he said. "But Mireille, no more lies. If you want to work on this marriage, it starts with complete honesty. And if you don't want to work on it, then we need to talk about what comes next." I nodded, not trusting my voice. "I'm sleeping in the guest room tonight," he said. "We can talk more tomorrow when we've both had time to process this." As he gathered his pillow and left the room, I sat alone on our bed, staring at my phone and the text from Joel that had unraveled everything. For the first time since this all started, I wondered if the price of feeling alive again was worth what it was going to cost me. Grant's mother Marion had always been polite to me, but I'd never been under any illusions about what she really thought. I wasn't good enough for her son, not educated enough, not ambitious enough, not from the right kind of family. She'd never said it outright, but it lived in the careful way she asked about my little job in HR, the suggestions she made about how I could better support Grant's career, the way she lit up when talking to Grant, but dimmed slightly when addressing me. So when she called Saturday morning to invite us for dinner, I knew something was up. "Just a casual family meal," she said when I answered the phone. "Eli will be there too. It's been too long since we all got together." Grant took the phone from me, and I listened to his side of the conversation with growing dread. "Tonight? Are you sure that's not too much trouble?" "No, we don't have plans." "Yes, I'll bring wine." "Okay, see you at 6. "I don't want to go," I said as soon as he hung up. "Why not?" "Because your mother hates me, and after last night, I'm not in the mood to pretend everything's perfect for 3 hours. Grant studied my face. "Maybe that's exactly why we should go." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means that normal couples don't cancel family dinners because they had a fight, and if we're going to try to work through this, we need to start acting normal." "Normal," I laughed bitterly. "Right, let's go pretend to be the happy family while your mother judges everything I say and your brother pretends I don't exist." "Eli doesn't pretend you don't exist. Eli thinks I'm a gold digger who trapped his little brother with an unplanned pregnancy." "That's not true." "Isn't it? He's never once had a conversation with me that lasted longer than 5 minutes. And your mother—" I shook my head. "Your mother has been waiting 7 years for you to come to your senses and find someone more suitable." Grant was quiet for a moment, and I could see him weighing his words carefully. "Maybe," he said finally, "but they're still family, and Sadie loves her grandmother and uncle. So this is about Sadie. This is about maintaining some stability while we figure out what we're doing." The word stability felt like another judgment, as if I were the chaotic element threatening the peaceful order of Grant's well-organized life. "Fine," I said, "but I'm not going to sit there and let your mother passive-aggressively tear me apart while you pretend not to notice. She won't do that. She does it every time, Grant. You just don't see it because she's careful to do it when you're not paying attention. If she says something inappropriate, I'll address it. Will you, or will you just smooth it over later and tell me she didn't mean it that way?" Grant's jaw tightened. "I'm not going to have this argument again." "What argument? The one where I point out that your family doesn't respect me and you act like I'm being oversensitive? The one where you blame everyone else for problems you've created?" The words hit like a slap. "Problems I've created. You're the one who's been lying and sneaking around. You're the one who chose to confide in a stranger instead of your husband. So yes, Mireille, problems you've created." I stared at him, stunned by the cold anger in his voice. This wasn't the Grant I was used to, the one who avoided conflict and smoothed over disagreements with careful diplomacy. This Grant was done being careful. "I see," I said quietly. "So we're back to this being all my fault." "I didn't say that." "You just did. You just said I created these problems. You created the lying. You created the affair. I'll take responsibility for whatever I did or didn't do in our marriage, but I won't take responsibility for your choices. It's not an affair. What would you call it?" I opened my mouth to argue, then closed it. What would I call it? The emotional intimacy with Joel had definitely crossed lines, and the physical intimacy, well, that spoke for itself. "We're going to dinner," Grant said into the silence. "We're going to act like adults, and we're going to get through one evening without creating more drama. Can you do that?" "Can I do that?" I repeated, like I'm some kind of unstable child who might have a tantrum. "Can you?" The question hung between us, loaded with all of Grant's accumulated frustration and disappointment, and the terrible thing was, I wasn't sure I could promise him what he was asking for. The rage I felt at being judged and blamed was so intense that I wasn't sure I could sit through dinner without saying something I'd regret. "I'll try," I said finally. "That's all I'm asking." But as we got ready to leave, I could feel the anger building inside me like pressure in a kettle. Grant's family had never accepted me, had never tried to understand me or appreciate what I brought to their son's life. And now, when my marriage was hanging by a thread, I was supposed to sit there and take their subtle criticism while pretending everything was fine. By the time we arrived at Marion's house, a perfectly maintained colonial in the kind of neighborhood where people still left their doors unlocked, I was vibrating with resentment. "Remember," Grant said quietly as we walked up the front path, "we're here for Sadie." Sadie, who was skipping ahead of us, excited to see her grandmother and uncle. Sadie, who had no idea that her parents' marriage was falling apart. Sadie, who deserved better than parents who couldn't figure out how to love each other anymore. Marion answered the door with the kind of warm smile she reserved for Grant and Sadie, which cooled noticeably when her eyes landed on me. "Mireille, dear, you look tired. Are you feeling all right?" And there it was, less than 30 seconds in the door, and she'd already managed to make me feel inadequate. "I'm fine, thank you." "Well, come in, come in. Eli's already here, and dinner's almost ready." The house smelled like roast beef and fresh bread, the kind of elaborate Sunday dinner Marion had been making for decades. She led us into the living room, where Eli was sitting with a beer, scrolling through his phone. "Hey, Grant." He stood to hug his brother, then nodded politely at me. "Mireille." "Eli." The greeting was as warm as it ever got between us. Eli had never been overtly hostile, but he'd never made any effort to include me in family conversations either. I was Grant's wife, Sadie's mother, a necessary but not particularly welcome addition to their tight-knit family unit. "Sadie, sweetheart, come tell Grandma about school," Marion said, scooping up her granddaughter. "I want to hear all about your presentation." As Sadie launched into an animated retelling of her morning at school, I found myself standing awkwardly by the fireplace, drink in hand, watching Grant seamlessly rejoin his family's rhythm. This was where he belonged, I realized. In this house, with these people, in this world of quiet respectability and unspoken expectations. I'd never belonged here. Not really. "So, Mireille," Marion said during dinner, "how's work going? Still enjoying your position at the insurance company?" "It's fine." I cut my roast beef with more force than necessary. "Same as always." "That's nice. Stability is so important, especially with a family." She turned to Grant. "Speaking of which, I ran into Patricia Morrison at the grocery store yesterday. You remember Patricia? She works at the bank downtown. She mentioned they're looking for someone with your experience for a management position." And off they went, discussing Grant's career prospects, while I sat there feeling invisible. This was how it always went. Marion would ask me one perfunctory question, then spend the rest of the meal focused on Grant and his achievements, his potential, his bright future. The salary would be significantly higher, Eli was saying, and the benefits package is supposed to be excellent. "I'm happy where I am," Grant replied, but I could hear the interest in his voice. "Happiness doesn't pay for college tuition," Marion said with a meaningful look at Sadie. "And you know how important it is to plan ahead." "We're planning ahead just fine," I said, unable to keep the edge out of my voice. Marion smiled at me with the kind of patronizing warmth that made my teeth ache. "Of course you are, dear. I just think it's wonderful when opportunities arise to better provide for family. Grant provides perfectly well for his family. Oh, I know he does. He's always been so responsible. I just meant that sometimes we have to make sacrifices for the people we love. The word sacrifices hung in the air, loaded with implication. I was the sacrifice, of course, the burden that kept Grant from reaching his full potential. What kind of sacrifices? I asked. Well, you know, sometimes we have to put family needs ahead of personal desires. Grant shot me a warning look, but I was past caring about keeping the peace. Personal desires like what? Oh, nothing specific. I just think it's admirable when people prioritize their responsibilities over their own impulses. The word impulses was delivered with surgical precision, and I realized with crystal clarity that Marion knew. Maybe not the details, but she knew something was wrong in our marriage, and she'd already decided whose fault it was. That's interesting advice, I said, setting down my fork. Tell me, Marion, what impulses do you think I should be controlling? Mireille, Grant said quietly. No, I'm curious. Your mother seems to have some very specific thoughts about my behavior. Marion's smile never wavered. I don't have any thoughts about your behavior, dear. I was speaking generally about the importance of commitment. Commitment to what? To family, to marriage, to the promises we make. And you think I'm not committed to my family? I think, Marion said carefully, that marriage requires constant effort from both partners, and sometimes one partner has to work harder than the other to make things work. The implication was clear. Grant was the one working harder, and I was the one making things difficult. You're absolutely right, I said, my voice deadly calm. Sometimes one partner does have to work harder. Sometimes one partner sacrifices their dreams, their identity, their sense of self to maintain the illusion of a perfect marriage. And sometimes the other partner's family sits in judgment without having any idea what they're talking about. Mireille, Grant's voice carried a clear warning. What? I'm agreeing with your mother. Marriage does require sacrifice. I've been sacrificing for 7 years. Sacrificing what? Eli asked, speaking up for the first time since dinner started. My career, my independence, my sense of who I am outside of this role I'm supposed to play. What role? Marion asked, her tone sharpening. The grateful wife, the perfect mother, the woman who's supposed to be endlessly thankful that Grant chose her, even though his family never thought she was good enough in the first place. That's not true, Grant said. Isn't it? I looked around the table at their shocked faces. When have any of you ever asked me about my goals, my dreams, what I want out of life? When have any of you ever treated me like I'm more than just an accessory to Grant's life? We've always welcomed you, Marion said stiffly. You've tolerated me. There's a difference. I think you're being unfair, Eli said. Unfair to who? To the family that's spent 7 years making it clear I don't quite measure up. To the husband who stopped seeing me as a person years ago. That's enough, Grant said, his voice sharp with anger. Is it? Because I'm just getting started. I turned back to Marion. You want to talk about commitment and responsibility? Let's talk about the responsibility a husband has to actually know his wife, to care about her happiness, to fight for their marriage instead of just assuming she'll be grateful for whatever scraps of attention he throws her way. Mummy, Sadie's small voice cut through the tension like a knife. Why are you yelling? I looked at my daughter, sitting wide-eyed and frightened in her chair, and felt the anger drain out of me all at once. What was I doing? What had I become? I'm sorry, sweetheart, I said, my voice breaking. Mummy's just upset. Are you mad at Grandma? No, baby, I'm not mad at Grandma. But the damage was done. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the soft clink of silverware as Sadie continued eating, oblivious to the wreckage around her. I think, Grant said finally, we should go. Grant, you don't have to leave, Marion said, but her eyes were cold when they looked at me. Yes, we do. We gathered our things in silence. Sadie protesting that she hadn't finished her dessert, Marion and Eli watching from the doorway as we loaded into the car. As we drove home, Grant's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, and I could feel his fury radiating through the car like heat. "Well," I said finally, "that went well." Don't. Don't what? Don't point out that your family has been judging me for years. Don't pretend that what just happened was anyone's fault but yours. My fault for finally telling the truth? Your fault for attacking my family to deflect from your own behavior. I wasn't deflecting. I was defending myself. From what? From my mother making conversation, from my brother asking a reasonable question. From being treated like I'm the problem in our marriage when your family has never even tried to understand me. Grant pulled into our driveway and turned off the engine, then sat there for a moment, staring straight ahead. "You know what the real problem is, Mireille," he said finally. "What?" "You've convinced yourself that everyone else is the reason you're unhappy. My family doesn't understand you. I don't appreciate you. Your job doesn't fulfill you. But you know what? Happiness isn't something other people give you. It's something you create for yourself. That's easy to say when everyone around you thinks you're perfect. No one thinks I'm perfect, but they don't blame me for their problems either." We sat in the car, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on us like a physical force. In the back seat, Sadie had fallen asleep, exhausted by the emotional chaos of the evening. "I can't do this anymore," I said quietly. "Do what?" "Pretend that we're going to fix this. Pretend that we want the same things. Pretend that either of us is happy." Grant turned to look at me, and for a moment I saw something that looked like relief in his eyes. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying that maybe we should stop pretending." We carried Sadie inside and put her to bed together, one last act of united parenting before everything fell apart. As I tucked her in, she grabbed my hand. The question hit me like a physical blow. "Mommy, are you and Daddy getting divorced?" "Why would you ask that?" I managed, my voice thin. "Because Tommy's parents got divorced and they used to fight like you and Daddy." I knelt in front of Sadie, brushing a strand of dark hair from her forehead. Her eyes, Grant's eyes, were wide and searching. At 7, she already understood more than I wanted her to. "I don't know, sweetheart," I said, because I couldn't lie to her anymore. "But no matter what happens, Daddy and I both love you very, very much." She nodded solemnly, as if she'd been expecting this answer. Then, in that quiet, matter-of-fact way children have, she added, "Can I still see Grandma Marion?" "Of course you can." "Good. I love her, even if you don't." Out of the mouths of babes. The words stung because they were true. I'd spent the last year resenting Grant's mother for every holiday she hosted, every opinion she offered, every time she looked at me like I wasn't good enough for her son. Sadie had noticed. Of course she had. After Sadie was asleep, Grant and I stood in our hallway, looking at each other like strangers. The house felt too quiet, without the usual tension crackling between us. "So what happens now?" I asked. "I don't know," he said. "But I think we both know this isn't working." "No," I agreed. "It's not." And for the first time in months, we were in complete agreement about something. We moved to the kitchen table, the same table where we'd once planned vacations, celebrated Sadie's first steps, argued about money until dawn. Now we sat across from each other with a single sheet of paper between us. A list of things we needed to decide. "Primary custody?" Grant asked gently. I swallowed. "I want her half the time, week on, week off, or maybe alternating days. I can't imagine not seeing her every day." He nodded slowly. "I want that too. But she needs stability, school, friends, routine. If we're bouncing her back and forth every few days..." "I know," I cut in. "I know it's hard on kids. I've read the articles. I'm terrified of losing her." "You won't lose her," he said. "We'll figure out a schedule that works for all of us. Maybe she stays with me during the school week and with you on weekends, then switch every other week. We can adjust as she grows." I stared at the paper, at the neat columns we'd started filling in. House, cars, bank accounts. The practical details felt obscene next to the raw ache in my chest. "What about the house?" I asked. Grant looked around the kitchen, the chipped blue mugs we'd bought on our honeymoon, Sadie's drawings taped to the fridge, the dent in the wall from the time I'd thrown a book in anger. "I'd like to keep it if that's okay. It's her home. She has her room, her friends next door. I can buy you out over time." I felt a flash of anger, how easily he assumed he'd stay, how quickly he'd claim the life we'd built together. Then I looked at the drawings on the fridge again, and the anger dissolved into something heavier, resignation. "Okay," I whispered, "but I want the lake house, the one we bought with my inheritance. I need somewhere to take her on weekends, somewhere that feels like mine." "Deal." We kept going. Retirement accounts, health insurance, who would claim Sadie on taxes. It was clinical, almost mechanical, and yet every decision carved another piece out of me. At one point, Grant reached across the table and touched my hand. I didn't pull away. "I'm sorry," he said, "for my part in this, for being distant, for letting us drift so far apart that Sadie noticed before we did." I blinked back tears. "I'm sorry too, for the resentment, for shutting you out, for making you feel like nothing you did was ever enough." We sat in silence after that, hands still touching, listening to the house breathe around us. The clock on the wall ticked softly. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked once, then quieted. Eventually I spoke. "We should tell her together. Tomorrow, before school." He nodded. "And we tell her the truth, gently, that we love her more than anything, that we'll always be her parents, that she didn't cause this." "Promise me we won't fight in front of her anymore," I said. "I promise." "And promise me you'll let her see your mum without me making it weird." He gave a small, sad smile. "I promise." We finished the list around 2 in the morning. When we stood up, our legs were stiff, our eyes red. Grant hesitated at the foot of the stairs. "Do you want me to sleep on the couch tonight?" he asked. I shook my head. "No, stay. Just stay on your side. One last night under the same roof." He nodded and we climbed the stairs together, footsteps soft on the carpet Sadie and I had picked out last summer. In our bedroom, we changed in the dark, slipped under the covers without touching. The space between us felt vast, but also strangely peaceful. I lay awake listening to his breathing slow into sleep. For the first time in months, there was no anger, no blame, only a quiet, shared sorrow. We had failed each other, but we hadn't failed Sadie. Not yet. We still had time to do this right, to show her that love could end without hate, that families could change shape and still hold together. Tomorrow we would sit her down on the living room couch, hold her hands, and tell her the hardest truth she'd ever hear. And then we would begin the long, careful work of building 2 separate homes that still felt safe. As sleep finally pulled me under, I thought of Sadie's small voice earlier that night. "I love her, even if you don't." I would learn to love Grandma Marion again. Not for Grant, but for Sadie. I would learn to let go of the house, the history, the version of us that no longer existed. I would learn to be the mother Sadie deserved, even if it meant sharing her. Because in the end, the only thing that mattered was keeping her heart whole while ours mended in pieces. And somewhere in that quiet, painful agreement in the hallway, I understood we were already starting. The next few days passed in a strange sort of limbo. Grant and I moved around each other like polite roommates, maintaining the facade of normalcy for Sadie's sake, while carefully avoiding any real conversation. He slept in the guest room, left for work early, came home late. I threw myself into my routine with desperate intensity, as if keeping busy could somehow hold back the inevitable. But the inevitable has a way of catching up with you. Wednesday night, after Sadie was in bed, I found Grant in his home office, laptop open, surrounded by papers. He looked up when I knocked on the door frame, and I was struck by how tired he looked. When had those lines appeared around his eyes? When had his shoulders started carrying so much tension? "We need to talk," I said. "Do we?" "Grant, we can't keep living like this. We're like ghosts haunting our own house." He saved whatever he was working on and closed the laptop. "What do you want to talk about?" "Us. This marriage. What we're doing." "I thought we'd already established what we're doing. We're pretending everything's fine until one of us breaks." The bitterness in his voice surprised me. Grant was never bitter. He was reasonable, diplomatic, endlessly patient. This version of him, sharp-edged and cynical, was someone I didn't recognize. "I don't want to pretend anymore," I said. "What do you want?" It was such a simple question, but it felt impossibly complicated. What did I want? I wanted to feel alive again. I wanted to matter to someone. I wanted to stop feeling like I was slowly disappearing into a life that had never really fit me. "I want to be happy," I said finally, "and you can't be happy here, with me." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "I don't think either of us can be happy like this." Grant leaned back in his chair, studying me with an expression I couldn't read. "So what are you proposing?" I think we need some space. Some time to figure out what we really want." "Space?" "Yes." "You mean separation?" The word hung in the air between us, heavy with finality. "Maybe. I don't know. I just know that this isn't working, and we can't keep pretending it is." Grant was quiet for a long moment, and I found myself holding my breath, waiting for his response. "And during this space," he said finally, "what exactly would that look like? Would you be free to continue your relationship with Joel?" The question caught me off guard. We hadn't talked about Joel since the night Grant found the text, and I'd been hoping we could avoid that particular minefield. "This isn't about Joel." "Isn't it?" "It's about us, about the fact that we've grown apart and we don't know how to find our way back to each other." "But Joel would be part of the picture." I hesitated, and that hesitation told him everything he needed to know. "I see," he said quietly. "Grant, it's not what you think." "What is it then? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you want permission to have an affair while keeping all the benefits of being married." "That's not fair." "Fair?" Grant laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You want to talk about fair? Fair would have been coming to me when you started feeling unhappy instead of finding comfort with another man. Fair would have been working on our marriage instead of checking out of it. Fair would have been honesty instead of lies." "I tried to talk to you." "No, you complained." "There's a difference. You complained about feeling trapped, about being bored, about wanting more excitement. But you never once said, 'Grant, I'm unhappy in our marriage and I think we need help.' Would you have listened?" "We'll never know, will we? Because you never gave me the chance." The pain in his voice was worse than anger would have been. I wanted to defend myself, to explain how impossible it had felt to bridge the gap between us, but looking at him now, I realized he was right. I had complained, but I'd never really tried to fix anything. "So what do you want?" I asked. "I want my wife back." "But she's been gone for months, hasn't she? Maybe longer." "I'm right here." "No, you're not. The woman I married wouldn't have lied to me. She wouldn't have snuck around behind my back. She wouldn't have chosen a stranger over her husband when she needed someone to talk to. People change, Grant. Yes, they do. And apparently, you've changed into someone I don't recognize." The words hit like a slap, but I couldn't deny their truth. I had changed. The question was whether I'd changed into someone better or someone worse. "So where does that leave us?" I asked. Grant stood up and walked to the window, staring out at our backyard, where Sadie's swing set sat empty in the darkness. "I've been thinking about that," he said, "and I think you're right. We do need space." "Really?" "Really, but not the kind of space you're thinking of." "What do you mean?" He turned back to face me, and something in his expression made my stomach clench with unease. "I mean that if you want out of this marriage, then get out, but don't ask me to enable your affair while you figure out what you want." "I'm not asking you to enable anything." "Aren't you?" You want to separate but keep living in the same house. You want space but not consequences. You want freedom but not responsibility. That's not true. Then prove it. Make a choice, Mireille. Either you want to work on this marriage or you don't, but I won't be your safety net while you explore other options. The ultimatum in his voice was unmistakable, and it sparked something defiant in me. You're trying to manipulate me, I said. I'm trying to protect myself. And Sadie. From what? From watching you destroy our family, one lie at a time. I'm not destroying anything. Then what would you call it? I stared at him, this man I'd been married to for 7 years, and realized I didn't know how to answer that question. What was I doing? What did I want? I want to be able to go out when I want to go out, I said finally. I want to have friends and conversations and experiences that don't revolve around this house and our schedules and everyone else's needs, including Joel, including whoever I choose to spend time with. Grant nodded slowly, like he was processing this information. Okay, he said. Then here's my offer. You can have all the freedom you want. You can go out whenever you want, see whoever you want, do whatever you want. But you can't do it as my wife. What's that supposed to mean? It means that if you want to be single, then be single. But don't ask me to stay married to someone who's already checked out of our relationship. You're giving me an ultimatum. I'm giving you a choice. The same choice you've been making every time you chose Joel over me, every time you chose lies over honesty, every time you chose your own desires over our marriage. That's not what I was doing. Isn't it? I opened my mouth to argue, but the words wouldn't come, because deep down, I knew he was right. Every choice I'd made over the past few months had been about what I wanted, not about what was best for our marriage or our family. So what are you saying? I asked. I'm saying that I love you, Mireille. I love the woman I married, and I'd fight for her if I thought she still existed. But I won't compete with another man for my own wife's attention, and I won't pretend that everything's fine while you figure out whether you want to be married or not. And if I choose to work on our marriage, then we work on it, together, with complete honesty and commitment from both of us. And if I don't... Grant's jaw tightened, and for a moment I saw a flash of the pain he'd been hiding behind his careful composure. Then we call our lawyers and figure out custody arrangements. The word custody hit me like a physical blow. Somehow, in all my fantasizing about freedom and excitement and feeling alive again, I'd never really considered the practical realities of what I was risking. You'd try to take Sadie from me. I'd try to protect her from the chaos you're creating, but I'd never try to take her from you. She needs her mother. Just not the mother I've become. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. We stood there in his office, surrounded by the detritus of his responsible, organized life, and I felt the weight of the choice he was forcing me to make. How long do I have to decide? I asked. You've already decided, Mireille. Every choice you've made for the past 3 months has been leading to this moment. I'm just asking you to be honest about it. That's not fair. Life isn't fair. Marriage isn't fair. But it requires commitment, and I can't be the only one making it. I wanted to argue, to point out all the ways he'd failed me as a husband, all the reasons I'd felt justified in seeking connection elsewhere. But looking at him now, really looking at him, I saw something I'd been too selfish to notice before. He was heartbroken. This man who'd never raised his voice at me, who'd supported my career and my dreams, who'd been a devoted father and a faithful husband, was watching his marriage crumble because of choices I'd made. And instead of fighting dirty or trying to hurt me back, he was giving me exactly what I'd been asking for, the freedom to choose. I need some air, I said. Mireille. What? Whatever you decide it honestly. Don't make this choice based on what you think you're supposed to want, or what other people expect from you. Make it based on what will actually make you happy. And if what makes me happy isn't this life, then you deserve to find the life that will. I stared at him, stunned by his generosity, even in the face of betrayal. Why are you being so understanding about this? Because I love you, and because I want you to be happy, even if it's not with me. The words broke something inside me, and I felt tears start to fall. Grant, I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. I know. I don't know how to fix this. Maybe it can't be fixed. Maybe we're just two people who grew apart and don't know how to grow back together. Maybe. But if there's any part of you that wants to try, really try, then I'm willing. But it has to be all of you, Mireille. Not just the part that's afraid of being alone or worried about what people will think. All of you. I wiped my eyes and nodded, even though I wasn't sure what I was agreeing to. I'm going for a drive, I said. I need to think. Okay. Will you be here when I get back? I'll be here. As I walked to the door, Grant called my name one more time. Yeah? Whatever you decide, I want you to know that loving you and being married to you has been the best part of my life. Even now, even with everything that's happened, I don't regret it. I couldn't speak past the lump in my throat, so I just nodded and left. I drove aimlessly through our neighborhood, past the perfect houses with their perfect lawns and their perfect families, and tried to figure out what I really wanted. Not what I thought I wanted, not what felt exciting or rebellious or alive, but what would actually make me happy in the long run. By the time I pulled back into our driveway, I'd made my decision. But as I walked up to our front door, I noticed a car I didn't recognize parked across the street. And as I got closer to the house, I could see an envelope tucked between the door and the frame. My hands were shaking as I pulled it free and read my name written in unfamiliar handwriting. Inside were divorce papers. Grant had made his choice too,